The Prophet ﷺ sent a number of Muslims to Habasha. Around 100 people, around a third of his population. He sent them to Abyssinia. When Quraysh heard of this, and the rumor came out and the information arrived to everyone in the city, that there are people from Quraysh, or most of them, that are living right now in Habasha, in Abyssinia, who have left Mecca, and have left Mecca because of oppression, this became a big deal. For many reasons. First of all, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ thought of doing this, that it actually occurred to him to allow Muslims to send them to a different continent altogether, to start a second base for Islam. As if he's saying, I'm not local. I never was local. I've always been international. I'm going to start right now. I'm sending people to a different continent, to live overseas, to start spreading Islam there, to build a society there. You're making it difficult for us here. I already have a different base. I already have a plan B if this doesn't work. Another thing is that now Quraysh has to answer to the Arab. Now the Arabic tribes are asking, is it true? Is it true that Uthman ibn Affan and Uthman ibn Mad'un and Ja'far ibn Abi Talib and Ramla bint Abi Sufyan, all these huge names, left Mecca and are living now in Habasha? Why? Have you guys oppressed them to that point? Have you mistreated these people to the point that they've actually left? It is not ethical. It's unethical to do that. Even the Arabs who don't agree with the Prophet ﷺ didn't think it was a good thing. You've actually forced these people to leave and go live in a different country. That's how intolerant you've become, Quraysh. So now Quraysh is under pressure. And then all the people whom children have left, now they're causing a riot. Look what you've done. My daughter now is living across the sea in a different country. I don't know if I'll ever see them again. My son has left. My brother has left. Why have you done this? And now it just caused a lot of controversy. It made the nobles of Quraysh's life much more difficult than it was before. It really stirred the pot. And if anything, the Prophet ﷺ did that really well. He was never in a state of reaction. He was never reacting. He was always planning, acting, and Quraysh was stuck with dealing with what he was doing. He was giving the punches and they were on the ropes. The exact opposite of what our ummah has been like for the last 300 years. Where we just sit around and wait for things to happen and then panic and then how do we fix this and what do we do? Because we have no long-term planning. The Prophet ﷺ going to Habasha, let them deal with that. It was a disaster. For Quraysh, they didn't know what to do. So what they do end up figuring out is Amr ibn al-As is someone who was a bit of a traveler and he knew a lot of the kings and princes in the land. He knew the king of Habasha who was An-Najashi. The Prophet ﷺ, if you remember last time, had told them, go to that land. Within it you will find a king who is just. لا يظلم عنده أحد. No one will mistreat you with him. He is just. He's not Muslim, he was a Christian. But he is just. Prophet ﷺ would point out good attributes when needed, when proper. It's not just Muslims who have good attributes and good values. Other people have good values as well. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't too proud, didn't think it was wrong to point out that a king from a different faith was just, better actually than the nobles of his own country who were related to him. Wasn't too proud to say that. So he sent the Sahaba. He didn't just send the poor, by the way. Not just the oppressed who were weak and were literally on the edge of being killed. He also sent some of the most noble people that he had. He sent his own daughter. He sent names that didn't need to go, like Uthman ibn Affan. Didn't need to go. Like Khalid ibn Sa'id ibn al-As. These people didn't need to leave. Their parents were some of the most powerful people in the region. But he sent them for a number of reasons. First of all, he wanted to make it clear that Muslims, we all work together. There is no segregation of socio-economic status. There is no, the rich sit here and then the poor sit there and we mingle exclusively. No, we all work together. You see, some of the rich Muslims could have said, Ya Rasulullah, why do I have to go? I don't have to go. Why are you sending me to Habasha? There's no reason for me to go. None of them, we have no record of any of them objecting. They all said, Hadir Ya Rasulullah. Go to Habasha, we'll go to Habasha. And to make it even more personal, he sent his own daughter, alayhi salatu wasalam. It was also to show in Najashi that I'm not sending you just a bunch of people who are too weak, who are enslaved, who are poor. I'm sending you some of the nobles of the land. Names that even in Najashi knew. Najashi knew Uthman ibn Affan. It was a big name. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, his father, Najashi knew him personally. So he wasn't just sending people who had... I love that part of the story. I know I talk about it a little bit, but I love it because the Prophet ﷺ made a point of making sure that the weak and the poor amongst his congregation within his ummah were never felt left out. He never threw them away. He never let them take care of them. He always took care of them. He always took care of them personally. He always made sure they were protected, made sure they had something. And if he couldn't, he made sure he lived like them, as you'll see later on with Ahl al-Suffah. If he didn't have the means to give them and to increase their wealth and make their lives better, he would live exactly like they were living, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Made sure he didn't eat more than them, drink more than them, dress better than them ever, alayhi salatu wasallam. It's because of that they loved him. It's because of that they followed him. Because we need leadership that does that don't leave people behind. We need leadership that care for everyone, that aren't just interested in the people with a lot of money and with a lot of D's and R's and M's and P's behind the beginning of their names. Looking for people for everyone. No matter who you are, if you're a Muslim, you're a part of this society. And your struggle is our struggle. And you matter to us just like everyone else. And we will put everything we have to help you and to support you. That was a big part of what he taught, alayhi salatu wasalam. And it's a big thing that we have lost within our own societies. It's something that we don't have anymore, unfortunately. The weak, the troubled, the disabled, the struggling, they're left behind. They fall behind. And no one looks back. And we keep on going. Then we wonder why we don't have unity. That's why. Because we're not doing what he did, alayhi salatu, when it came to these. Oh, wait. All right. So they meet the Najashi when they make it there. All 100 of them. Of course, they went in groups. And he grants them a place to live and allows them to practice their deen and allows them to speak of it openly and allows them to work and to own. And they were integrated into society. They held on to their culture. They held on to their beliefs. And things were going okay for around a month. And as I said, Amr ibn al-As was known in that region. So Quraysh said, you need to go. You and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah was also someone who was a merchant who went all around the different countries. And he had bought and he had traded with Habasha, so he knew the king as well. So you two know the king. They know him. They're personal friends. Take him a lot of gifts. We'll all give you a gift. Take them. And then go to the king and talk to him. And let him send them all back. Now this is a big problem. If this actually works, it's going to be a disaster. If the Muslims are sent back to Mecca, what Quraysh will do to them. You keep on going. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. If Quraysh actually gets their hands on these people who left Abyssinia, to them it's treason. Yeah, they have caused the biggest ruckus in the land for the last maybe 50 years. Going back is going to be suicide, basically, for these Muslims. So when Amr ibn al-As arrives and starts speaking to the Najashi, he says the following words. He says, أيها الملك إنه قد ضوى إلى بلدك غلمان سفهاء. Indeed, O king, there are a bunch of ignorant and reckless youth. And this is what the word he used. Amr is very smart. Amr is من دهاة العرب. Dahiya. He's a very, very smart guy. And you'll see this if you study his life story. He was very smart. He was a good negotiator. He was very diplomatic. He came to this king and he starts painting this picture. He tells them, a king, a bunch of reckless youth have come to your country. فَارَقُوا دِينَ قَوْمِهِمْ وَلَمْ يَدْخُلُوا فِي دِينِكَ. They have left the religion of their parents and they didn't even enter your religion. So you can see he's playing the king. He's preparing the king to get angry. See, a bunch of reckless youth who left their parents, they've changed their religion, they're not even following yours. بِدِينٍ وَجَاءُوا بِدِينٍ ابْتَدَعُوهُ لَا نَعْرِفُهُ نَحْنُ وَلَا أَنْتَ. And they came and they brought this new religion that no one knows. You have never heard about it. وَقَدْ بَعَثَنَا إِلَيْكَ أَشْرَافُ قَوْمِهِمْ مِنْ آبَائِهِمْ وَأَعْمَامِهِمْ لِتَرُدَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِمْ فَهُمْ أَعْلَى بِهِمْ عَيْنًا وَأَعْلَمُ بِمَا عَابُوا عَلَيْهِمْ وَعَاتَبُوهُمْ فِيهِ. And the nobles of my land, their uncles and their fathers, have sent us to you, begging you to send their children back so they can fix this problem, so they can address what they have done, so they can bring people together again. This is what Amr ibn al-As is telling the king. And to be honest, if I was a king, I probably would have said yes. Alhamdulillah, I'm not a king. Never will be. But if I were, I probably would have said, yeah, that sounds good. I don't know why I need these people. I have enough problems as it is. Take back your people and let them deal with their parents. But you can almost hear the words of the Prophet ﷺ echoing in the background as he said, لا يظلم عنده أحد. No one is mistreated in his court. No one is going to be mazloom, oppressed in his court. And the king's answer was very clear and almost immediate. قال لا والله حتى أسمع منهم. No, I must hear from them too. You can never judge without hearing both sides, can you? Never. It's impossible. No matter what. Once there was a known judge who was sitting in the court, and beside him was a scholar, and a man walked into his court saying, Fulan, he poked my eye. Like he literally, I can't see through my left eye. Imagine, it's horrible. And he was bleeding, and the scholar was he was grossed out, I think, by what he saw. And the judge is sitting there very quietly. So the scholar looked at the judge and said, احكم له, send the police to arrest the person who did this and put him in jail for poking this guy's eye. فقال ما أدراك, هذا شريح القاضي, قال ما أدراك لعل الآخر فقئت عينه. What do you know? Maybe the other guy, both eyes are poked out. What do you know? Did you talk to the other person? If you read Surah Sad, you'll find a very important part of that the first story is Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood alayhi salam, on his day off, as he was worshipping in his mihrab, he was praying. He took a day off to pray. Alayhi salatu wasalam, Dawood. Not to play, to pray. And he would tell people he's a judge all throughout the week. Takes one day so he can focus on prayer. Please don't bother him during that time. As he's praying in his mihrab, two people jump over the fence of his home, of his castle, wherever he lived. And they entered the room where he was praying, startled him. He's a king. He's a prophet. Wasn't the proper time, wasn't the proper presentation. And they start telling him, we have to tell you the problem. So one of them speaks. He said, this brother of mine, he has 99 camels and I have one camel. And my brother said, here, I'll take care of your one camel. Then he took care of my camel and he never gave it back. And now I have nothing. So Dawood alayhi salam, being startled, thrown off, off his balance, out of his element. This is not the day for this. He could have thrown them out, but he decided to give judgment. So he said something. قال لقد ظلمك بسؤال نعجتك إلى نعاجه. Indeed, he has made a mistake by doing that. And Dawood continues to speak. And then Dawood alayhi salam figures it out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there were two of the angels, weren't two people. Just sent them over, just for a test. وظن داود أنما فتنا. And Dawood figured out he made a mistake. This was a test and he failed. What did he do wrong? Obviously, you know now. He didn't listen to the other party. He made a judgment based on what the first person said. No matter how horrible the first story you hear is, you have to listen to the second. You always have to listen to the other side. There's always two sides for every story. We live in a world today, especially if you're on social media, where you exist in a bubble that is manufactured for you by algorithms to continue to feed you the stuff that you believe in and to take away from your feed the stuff that you don't believe in, strengthening your biases, making it easy to hate, making it more difficult to relate, making it more difficult to understand others and to broaden your mind and to comprehend the different opinions that exist in the world. This is what's happening today. We are literally falling victim to the monsters that we created. My advice for you is, if you of course you have a phone, and of course you have some social media. Be very careful with how you deal with these things. Anyone have an older family member who keeps on sending WhatsApp messages all day long? I have a bunch of people on my phone who have been muted for like 6 years. Because every day, 3 to 4 messages of complete lies. And I don't have time, I'm not going to read them, but I don't have time to come up to these people and say, look, everything you've sent me, all 3,469 messages you've sent me in the last 3 years, everything is wrong. It's made up, it's incorrect information that you've been fed because you have the tendency to believe in it by people who have the same tendencies. In order for us to be able to go through all that, it's very important I understand when older generations, people can't make, but I don't accept it from the younger generation. You have the ability to sort through a lot of the garbage. You have the ability to figure out that there's more than one story for everything that is being put out there. And you need to learn to listen to both sides. And you need to learn to build your own opinion based on proper facts and not by made up stuff. Or else you're going to live in a world of illusions. And I deal with people like that all the time. Someone I know is in their own, it's too far out now. I can't even reel them back in to show that, look, a lot of what you've been told is just untrue. And it's difficult, but it's important. And I think it's worth our time. Al-Malik al-Najashi, he was someone who was balanced. He heard a very compelling argument, almost perfect argument. Amr ibn al-As, very smart. He said, let's wait. I need to hear from them first. So he calls upon the Muslims, and they send, of course, a group of people to represent them. Amongst them is Uthman ibn Affan, and Khalid ibn Sa'id ibn al-As, and Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and a number of others. And he tells them, بلغني أنكم تركتم دينكم ولم تدخلوا في ديني. I heard that you've left your own faith. You haven't entered my faith. وقد جئتم إلى بلادي. Now you've come to my country. فماذا جاء بكم وما هذا الدين الذي اتبعتموه. So what brought you here? And what is this new faith that you are following that no one has heard of? You mind going forward? I think it's not going to work again for whatever reason. Yeah. So, now they have to answer. There you go. Go for it. One more. Perfect. On the spot, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib was chosen. I love this part of the story. It's very fun. He was chosen on the spot to answer the king. He has 2 minutes. It's an elevator presentation. Ever heard of that? Very quick. Within 2 minutes before the elevator arrives where it's going, you have to be able to explain what it is that you want to get done. Or this guy's walking out, he has no time for you. You have to make your point quickly. You have to convince the person of doing what you think you want or you need. And Ja'far is right now defending basically 100 people. If he fails and they're sent back, all 100, they're dead. Literally, if they're not dead, they can't go back home. They're going to be scattered all over the place. He's also defending a lot of the very, very poor Muslims who definitely, if they go back, are going to be killed. And he can see, when he walks in, Ja'far is very smart. He looks, he sees Amr ibn al-As, he sees Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah. Immediately they understand, okay, they know what's going on. Quraysh has sent in who they think is going to fix the problem. And now they're being questioned. And the king, who seemed to be very, very open and easygoing at the beginning, has concerns now. His tone has changed. His face has changed. And Ja'far has to figure out, and I think, what did he have, a couple of seconds? To quickly come up with a narrative, a way to explain things that would be better than what Amr ibn al-As said. What I used to do the last three times around, what I used to do was I would ask people to prepare a presentation. Maybe I'll do that for next time. Do that for me. I'll tell you what Ja'far said. Don't tell me what Ja'far said. Because Ja'far radiallahu anhu is going to answer the king within the context of the time and place he lived in. The explanation of what Islam is subjective to the context of time and place. I believe that if Ja'far stood up and said, okay, Najashi, here's how it goes. So, the Prophet ﷺ, there's 5 arkan for Islam, okay? So there's shahada, and then there's salah, and siyam, and zakah, and hajj. Now siyam happens in Ramadan, and zakah, you have to give this, and hajj is once a year, you have to do it at that time, and then, hold on, and then there's a part called iman, you have to be, and the king at that point, as many of you in this halaqah will fall asleep, and look at Amr ibn al-As and say, look, I really thank you for the gifts, you can take the guys home. Please just get him to stop talking, I have enough in my life. The moment you become redundant and start talking and start rambling on and saying things that don't make any sense and don't really tell a story and there's no narrative that the person listening to you can relate to, you lose interest. You come to a khutbah Jum'ah and what's being said is not related, something you can relate to, it's not relevant to you. You fall asleep. You start looking at hoping that this ends. You don't really take anything. You're sitting in a classroom and the teacher is not engaging in the topic you don't like. You stop listening. You fall asleep. You don't want to go to school. You don't want to go to... This is the problem of life. If what's being said does not make sense, if it is not well presented, no one's going to listen. Ja'far had to find a way to say it. And you're going to see Ali radiallahu anhu. Yeah, he's one of my most, one of my favorite parts of Seerah. I'm just visualizing in my mind. Yani Ja'far radiallahu anhu. Well, how old is he right now? Maybe 21. Maybe 21. Very young guy. Young. He's standing up in front of the king. You can see Amr ibn al-As and Abdullah ibn Rabi'ah standing right beside him. Two people who are his enemies to them. They would like to kill them. And he has to articulate clearly, intelligently, in a very short period of time, with the least amount of words possible, without losing in Najashi's line of thought, and convince him to keep them there. If he fails to convince him, the pressure is huge on Ja'far radiallahu anhu. Radiallahu anhu wardah. One of the people who left us a bit too soon. He died in Uhud, right? Or when did he die? Yeah, there you go, in Mu'tah. Someone's paying attention. He died in Mu'tah, before the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba would say the person who was the most similar to the Prophet ﷺ, and the way he looked, and the way he spoke, was Ja'far radiallahu anhu. SubhanAllah, that's how he was. So he comes up quickly with a 2-minute presentation. It's actually less than 2 minutes. I used to read it for people in Arabic just to prove it's less than 2 minutes. And of course I'm quick, so I can do it in 35 seconds. But it took him 2 minutes. He'll break it down into a couple of paragraphs. 5 paragraphs. He has 5 thoughts, and he's going to make 5 points. If you want to be a good public speaker, you have to learn, before you start talking, to have a plan of what you're going to talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? You have to, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is the first point, second point, third point, fourth point, fifth point. You know what you're going to do. And then you can elaborate on each point for as long as you want to, then you move on to the one after. If you stand up and just start rambling, you will lose interest in what you're saying. You will lose interest in yourself. Like you will get bored of listening to yourself speak. But if you know what you're doing, I will finish this point, move on to that one. It's much more engaging even for you. I don't like in public speaking carrying cards or I don't like that. I think if you're going to do public speaking, you have to do it properly. You have to have it up here. If you don't know your material well enough to have it up here, you shouldn't be talking about it. Go back and keep on practicing this topic and learning about it and thinking about it until you have it all up here. And then all you need is just the sequence of issues. You can use slides sometimes. Ja'far is doing this with no slides. He's not using slides. He came up with 5 points he wanted to make. I'll read to you what he said, and I'll show you the 5 points that he made. Radiallahu anhu. Making it very clear, very succinct. The king will understand. The first thing he said, أيها الملك إنا كنا قوما أهل جاهلية نعبد الأصنام ونأكل الميتة ونأتي الفواحش ونقطع الأرحام ونسيء الجوار ويأكل القوي منا الضعيف. Said, O king, we used to be people who worshipped rocks. And then he started to count for him all the things they did besides that one action that the king would agree to, that were not good things. And he started to point out, we used to eat mayta. We didn't do proper dhabh. We would eat animals that just died naturally on their own without proper slaughtering. And we would perform fawahish. We would do things that are haram. We would ruin relationships amongst families. Tribes that were cousins would fight for years and years and years. And we would mistreat our neighbors. And the strong would eat the weak. We had a jungle-like system that we lived by, where no one cared for the weak. The weak were just eaten by the strong, were taken advantage of. The first paragraph, telling the king how things were. I'll show you how Ja'far has a couple of points. First point, I'm going to tell him how it was. And I'm going to use in that things that the king agrees on with me, that aren't good things. See, he didn't say, we never gave zakah, king. King, we didn't, fast. As important as these things are, because the king doesn't understand what that means. He doesn't agree with you that was a bad thing to begin with. You have to point out the things that the king would agree with you with, or the person who's listening, that, yeah, those are bad things, I agree. Mistreating your neighbors, I totally agree, bad thing. These are universal values that existed during that time. That was his first paragraph. Second paragraph. حتى بعث الله إلينا رسولا منا نعرف نسبه وصدقه وأمانته وعفافه. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us a messenger from amongst us, whom we know his background, we know his honesty, We know his amana, his trustworthiness. And we know his good ethics. The second paragraph, I'm going to tell him who the Prophet ﷺ was. I'm not going to go into detail. Just going to give him a few points that he will also agree with. Good points. See, this man, he's amongst us. He's not someone who came from afar. He's not foreign to us. He's not some guy who came from a different country. We don't know where he came from. We know who this guy is. We know what family he comes from. We knew he was always honest, always a good person, always high morals and ethics. Second paragraph, I'm going to tell him who the Prophet ﷺ is in a very simple way. Something he can relate to, he can understand. Third paragraph. فَدَعَانَا إِلَى عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ وَحْدَهُ وَخَلْعِ مَا كَانَ يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُنَا من الحجارة والأوثان وأمرنا بصدق الحديث وأداء الأمانة وصلة الرحم وحسن الجوار والكف عن المحارم والدماء ونهانا عن الفواحش وقول الزور وأكل مال اليتيم فصدقناه وآمنا به. So he called upon us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And he called upon us to be honest, to be trustworthy, to be kind, to take care of our relatives, to take care of our neighbors, to not perform fawahish, to not harm the weak, to not take the wealth of the yatim. Again, he's telling the king all the stuff that the king will relate to. Yes, those are good things, good thing, good thing, good thing. I agree to. I don't need to be Muslim to agree to those things. So we believed in him and we followed him. The third paragraph, I'm going to tell him what the Prophet ﷺ taught. This is how first paragraph, this is how we were in Jahiliyyah. Horrible things he can relate to. Then tell him about the Prophet ﷺ, a few words, something he can relate to. And then tell him what the Prophet ﷺ taught. In terms that he can relate to. See, the important part is that he's saying things that the king can accept as well and agree to. Fourth, فَعَدَى عَلَيْنَا قَوْمُنَا وَعَذَّبُونَا لِيَرُدُّونَا إِلَى عِبَادَةِ الْأَوْثَانِ وَضَيَّقُوا عَلَيْنَا وَحَالُوا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَ دِينِنَا. And then our family members, our qawm, our people, Quraysh, the people that our parents and our nobles, they oppressed us and they tortured us and they tried to force us to leave this way of life, to leave our deen. And when their oppression came to a point that we could not survive anymore and life became so difficult, we left. The fourth chapter, showing the king what the people beside him did. These two people who came and told him, this is what they did to us. Fourth chapter. Fifth one. فَقَالَ لَنَا نَبِيُّنَا اخرجوا إلى أرض الحبشة فإن بها ملكا لا يظلم عنده أحد فخرجنا إلى بلادك ورغبنا في جوارك ورجونا ألا نظلم عندك. آخر حتة كده للملك يعني سكرة للملك. And the last point he told him, and then our prophet told us that we must come to your land. See, at the end he's smart, Ja'far. Kings like to be praised. The kings, they're used to it. They need to be complimented a little bit. Not by going beyond what is ethical and proper, but he has to give him something. So he told him, our prophet told us to go to your land specifically. And he told us that you would never, ever treat anyone unjustly. So we came to your land. And we were hoping in your justice. And we're hoping that we will not be oppressed in your presence and in your court. See, five paragraphs. In his mind, he knew exactly what he was doing. Tell him how we were before Islam. Tell him who the Prophet ﷺ is in a few words. Tell him what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. Tell them what the people beside him have done to us. And then give him a little boost of confidence. Just a few kind words. The Najashi is probably thinking to himself, your Prophet said, come to me specifically? Yes, to you specifically. Feels good about himself. It's wise. It's a good way of doing it. And that was his presentation. It takes 2 minutes to say these things. That's what it took. 2 minutes, he said it very clearly. He sat down. Of course, probably the most nerve-wracking moments for them. You can only imagine what they were thinking at that. All it takes is for the king to say, yeah, I don't like it. It's over. They're going to be sent back. Tens and 30, 40 people will be slaughtered. The rest will be thrown in jail. The rest will be, it's going to be horrible. They can't go back. They have to figure out something else. They have to call the Prophet ﷺ somehow and say, where do we go? We can't come back to Mecca. It's not going to work. You're going to see the people will come back. Some of them are going to come back and see what's going to happen. Just so you believe me that it's actually going to be like that. So here's the translation. Usually I go through it, but that's fine. So the king, of course, he's too smart to say yes immediately or no immediately. So he says, he's kind of somewhere in the middle. Ja'far seemed to have intrigued his curiosity. So he said, هل معك مما جاء به من الله شيء? Do you have anything from what your prophet has from God? Like, you're saying you have a messenger, he's a prophet, he must have a book or text of some sort. What does he have? And of course, Ja'far who at that point is like, that's why. That's why the Prophet taught me Surah Maryam before I left. That's why. Now, I wasn't sure why he was teaching us this surah before we left, but this is why. And Ja'far, without hesitating, he begins, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت من أهلها مكانا شرقيا فاتخذت من دونهم حجابا فأرسلنا إليها روحنا فتمثل لها بشرا سويا قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا قالت أنى يكون لي غلام ولم يمسسني بشر ولم أك بغيا قال كذلك قال ربك هو علي هين ولنجعله آية للناس ورحمة منا وكان أمرا مقضيا فحملته فانتبذت به مكانا قصيا فأجاءها المخاض إلى جذع النخلة قالت يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا فناداها من تحتها ألا تحزني قد جعل ربك تحتك سريا وهزي إليك بجذع النخلة تساقط عليك رطبا جنيا فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما فلن أكلم اليوم إنسيا فأتت به قومها تحمله قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا يا أخت هارون ما كان أبوك امرأ سوء وما كانت أمك بغية فأشارت إليه قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا. And by that time the king was sobbing in a voice you could hear. And all of the batariqa, all the advisors and servants of the court and men of the court were doing the same. And Amr ibn al-As knew he had completely lost that one. If this was a game, it's 1-0 Ja'far. He was in tears. These verses are beautiful. They're still beautiful today. Whenever any qari stands up and reads them well, it's beautiful to listen to. You never get bored of Surah Maryam. You never get bored. It's that anthem of family, mothers and sons and fathers and sons and sons and fathers and siblings, quarreling and loving and working things out. It's just beautiful. Talking about Maryam, the superwoman, the woman that was able to change the norm, the lady who literally changed the world with her perseverance. It was a beautiful story to listen to. And he's listening to Ja'far speak of Mary and of Jesus in a way that just filled his heart. And he was sobbing at the end of this. فَبَكَى النَّجَاشِيُّ وَبَكَتْ أَسَاقِفَتُهُ. They all cried. And then Najashi turned to Amr ibn al-As and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah. And he said to both of them, إِنَّ هَذَا وَالَّذِي جَاءَ بِهِ عِيسَى لَيَخْرُجُ مِنْ مِشْكَاةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ انطلقا فوالله لا أسلمهم إليكما أبدا. You see, what he just said and what Isa taught comes from the same source. Leave my land. I will never give them to you. Yeah. So what happened after that is Amr ibn al-As was like, all right, I lost the first round. Amr was a smart guy. Like, okay, king, it was a long day. You seem very emotional. How about I go and get some sleep? I'll see you in the morning. The king, being his friend, is like, all right, fine. Go get some sleep. We'll see you in the morning. Now, Amr ibn al-As comes up with a diabolical, he comes up with a plan. If you notice, Ja'far stopped right where he needed to in the recitation of the surah. Right? He stopped right before Isa spoke. That's where he stopped, because that's a good time to leave. Public speaking, a good part of it, I'll tell you this. I'm not good at that part, but I'll tell you. You should always leave before people get bored. You should always stop before people get bored of you, before people want to leave. Just stop. I ramble on and I don't know. But most people, good public speakers will leave, will end it, and you're wanting more. You're hoping for more. You're like, no, continue. That's a good. So Ja'far stopped just where he needed to. If he continued, it would have been not as good. He stopped right where he needed to in the surah. I'll show you tomorrow, or next week, inshallah. He stopped right where he needed to. Amr ibn al-As didn't know the surah, but Amr ibn al-As came up with something, with a round 2. So the next morning, Amr ibn al-As comes back and there's a round 2. I will talk to you about that, inshallah, next week, next Friday, inshallah, after Salat al-Isha.